It was 6:42 a.m. in downtown Chicago. The sky was still bruised with the deep purples of early morning. Cars hissed across wet asphalt, and steam curled out of sewer grates like the city's breath in winter. On the corner of 9th and Lexington, just beneath the scaffolding of a half-renovated building, a man sat slumped beside a grocery cart. His name was Malcolm, 54 years old, a Vietnam veteran, and homeless. He wore 4 layers of mismatched clothing, a faded U.S. Army jacket clinging to his bony frame. His beard, peppered with gray, reached his chest, and his hands trembled slightly as he poured black coffee from a styrofoam cup into a metal can for warmth. People passed by him every day. Some would glance, most wouldn't. He had become part of the background to them. Malcolm wasn't a man anymore. He was just there. Malcolm used to have a family once, a wife named Lorna, and a daughter named Elise. That was 2 decades ago. PTSD had eroded his sanity, and substance abuse had cost him everything else. After years of shelters and occasional arrests for loitering, he'd learned not to speak. Unless spoken to, his cart carried everything he owned: a rolled-up sleeping bag, books with torn covers, an old Walkman that didn't work anymore, and a plastic folder with worn medals he hadn't looked at in years. One morning, as snow began to fall lightly, a young girl dropped a red scarf near him. She couldn't have been older than 6. Malcolm picked it up. Before he could speak, her mother pulled her away. "Don't touch that," she whispered, loudly enough for Malcolm to hear. Malcolm didn't react. He wrapped the scarf around his neck and went back to watching the street. 4 blocks away, in a high-rise building with tinted windows, Michael Rowan was preparing for another board meeting. 41 years old, CEO of a logistics empire, owner of 3 homes, 2 Porsches, and a timeshare in Aspen. He didn't notice Malcolm on the sidewalk. He barely noticed people at all anymore. Michael's assistant handed him a tablet. "Homelessness rates have gone up again, so there's a proposal to invest in shelters downtown. It'll help our image." He waved a hand. "PR isn't worth the real estate." Next, Michael wasn't heartless. He was just busy. But something shifted that day. During his lunch break, he walked alone to the cafe where his driver usually waited. Outside, he saw Malcolm sitting quietly, watching the snow melt on the curb. Their eyes met. For the first time in years, Michael didn't look away. The man in the cafe didn't speak. He just stared at the cup. The young man at the counter was nervous. This was his first time coming to this cafe. He'd only come because his friend had told him to. But now, he was regretting it. The man at the counter had only stared at him awkwardly the entire time. "You want something?" The man in the cafe finally looked up. "Oh, yeah, sorry." The young man fumbled for his wallet. "It's on me. I got this for you." He placed a coffee and a breakfast sandwich on the counter. The man looked at the food, then at the young man's manicured fingers. "You ain't a reporter, are you?" he asked suspiciously. "No," the young man replied, a little hurt. "Just someone who never noticed you before." The man didn't say thank you, but he took the sandwich, and that became routine. Every morning, a sandwich, a coffee, sometimes gloves, sometimes silence, sometimes stories. Michael learned that Malcolm once taught history before the war, that he used to play jazz on the trumpet, that he hadn't seen his daughter since 2003. "This is the most heartbreaking thing I've ever seen." One morning I wasn't there. Michael waited and waited. By noon, he found me, slumped in an alley 2 blocks down. My lips were blue and I was barely breathing. He called 911, rode in the ambulance with me to the ER, and waited with me until I was stable. The nurse told him that I had hypothermia and severe dehydration. Michael paid my hospital bill without even thinking. For the first time in years, I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes, a belief that maybe, just maybe, we could get through this. It meant the world to me that he didn't give up on me, that he fought for me, that he cared. Because in that moment, I didn't feel like I was alone. I felt loved. I felt seen. I felt valued. And that's all someone can ask for in life. This is the most heartbreaking story I've ever read. It's about a man named Michael who arranged for his best friend, Malcolm, to be moved to a private care facility. The place was warm and had clean sheets and no bureaucracy. Malcolm resisted at first, but slowly he began to soften. The story says that one day, Malcolm smiled. They sat together some evenings, drinking tea. Michael listened while Malcolm talked, and one day Malcolm said to him, "You ever wonder how close any of us are to ending up like me?" Michael couldn't answer. This story is heartbreaking because it makes you think about your own mortality. It also makes you think about the value of human connection and the importance of treating others with kindness and respect, no matter what their age or their station in life. If you want to read more stories like this, I highly recommend checking out the author's page. 6 months ago, Malcolm died peacefully in his sleep. He was an amazing guy who had a really rough childhood. He never had a bed until he was 18 years old. When he passed away, he left behind a single letter. It was written in careful cursive. "Dear Michael," he said, "you saw me. You didn't have to, but you did. You gave me a name again. You gave me a bed. You gave me a reason to believe that not all doors stay closed. I don't have much to leave you, except the truth. One act of kindness can build a bridge big enough to walk someone home. Thank you for walking me there." Wow. Just wow. It is one of those letters that you read and you feel like you a better person for having read it. A month later, Michael did something no one expected. He sold one of his companies, the smallest one, and he used the money to create a foundation called the Sidewalk Between Us. And it funded transitional housing, mental health support for veterans, local shelters, storytelling workshops for the homeless. It became more than just PR. It became his purpose. He told Malcolm's story in a TEDx talk, in conferences, in interviews. He didn't do it to glorify himself, but because there were thousands of Malcolms still waiting on sidewalks. There's a lesson in here somewhere. Maybe it's never too late to make a difference. Maybe one person can change the world, or maybe it's just a good idea to have a plan B, just in case. You passed by someone like Malcolm today. Maybe you didn't even see them, but if this story made you pause, even for a second, then you've already crossed the first step on that sidewalk. The line between the wealthy and the poor is thinner than it looks. And sometimes all it takes is a hot coffee and eye contact to begin rebuilding a life. When I was 24 years old, I was working as a barista at a coffee shop in New York City. And one day this man came in, sat down, ordered a hot coffee. And when I handed him his coffee, he looked me in the eyes and he said, "Thank you." He looked me in the eyes and he said, "I just wanted to tell you that you have a beautiful smile." And then he took a sip of his coffee and he said, "Can I ask you something? Do you believe in God?" And I said, "Yes." And he began to share his testimony with me. He said, "My name is Malcolm. I used to be a drug addict. I used to be an alcoholic. I was homeless for 10 years. But God took me off the streets. He put me in a shelter, gave me a job, gave me hope, gave me a new life.